saw it. We came under it. And, they want us up here on this side. So on the sidewalk. You can arrest them. You can arrest these two. It's fine. All right, can everybody hear me? Thumbs up if everybody can hear me. Good, good. You guys good over here? Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Bakari Sellers. I'm a lawyer at the Strom Law Firm. Standing with me today, I have Ali Benevento, Jessica Fickling, and State Representative John Ray Clemens. We're here today to announce another filing or lawsuit in what we now know is a Varsity Spirit sex abuse scandal. Let me just say that this has been one of the honors of my life in representing many of these very, very strong Jane and John Does. Whether or not it was Rockstar Cheer in South Carolina, or whether or not it's Premier here in Tennessee, just the strength of these survivors who have gone through so much has just been so meaningful to me. I will tell you that today we filed a lawsuit similar to the one we filed against Rockstar Cheer, mentioning Varsity Spirit, of course, USASF, USA Cheer, Premier, which is based here in Tennessee, and Nick Frizzell. We were made aware a few weeks ago, and I will just be completely blunt and honest with you, of young victims throughout this region that Mr. Frizzell, a University of Tennessee cheerleader and coach at Premier, took advantage of many, many young boys. I have seen more masturbation videos and Snapchats I have seen more disgusting, predatory information than anybody should have to go through, and these young boys and their families will be forever altered. But this is not just something that happens in Greensboro. This is not just something that happens in Knox County. This is something that's happening all around the country. The most amazing thing is Varsity just built a new facility here in Memphis, Tennessee, and they built it on the back of sex abuse victims. That's a fact. And so what we plan on doing is going through this process and making filings where necessary, and hopefully changing the culture that has allowed USASF, Bain Capital, Varsity has allowed sex abuse to go. It feels as if they simply don't care. This morning, the way we're going to do this is Representative John Ray Clemens is going to come up after me. Alexandra, or Ali Benevento, will be after him, followed by Jessica Fickling. And one of the things that Jessica always says, which I think is pertinent even more today, and the more we go through these cases, is that this is the age-old adage of people putting profit over people. They allowed young people to be abused simply so that they could do things like build a new building in downtown Memphis. And so we chose this location to file this lawsuit so that all these victims could know that we're taking this message to their front door. And with that, Representative Clemens.
Yeah, thank you. Let me first just say what a privilege it is and an honor not only to work with these attorneys with whom I have the privilege to work on this important lawsuit in these cases, but it's such a privilege and an honor to represent these families who, children who have been victimized by this and who have suffered greatly. We are, like Bakari said, we're filing this here in Memphis to bring it to their front doorstep. It is important for our justice system and those of us who care about children and the safety of children being our priority to make a statement to say, not in the state of Tennessee, not in these other states where this unfortunate, tragic situation has taken place, but we are standing up. This is the reason for our justice system, is to hold people accountable, and we intend to do so right here in the great state of Tennessee. So again, thank you for being here, and I'll turn it over.
Good morning. As Bakari alluded to a few moments ago, we are here on behalf of two very brave young men who were preyed upon by a person who was, for all practical purposes, a varsity golden boy, an all-star cheerleader, a coach, a world champion. And once again, in this case, as in others, we see this pattern of varsity and USASF accepting money from parents to have their children cheer, promising an atmosphere of safety, failing to deliver a safe environment for these children, not only allowing for this abuse to occur, but turning a blind eye when they knew it was occurring. Children being victimized, them obstructing the reporting process, and then them issuing statements reiterating this message of safety, and that repeats. But there was no safety specifically for our John Doe number 1 and John Doe number 2. To speak specifically about John Doe number 1, Premier Jim had information and had reports that Mr. Frizzell had sexually abused young boys for weeks, months, and yet he continued to be allowed in the gym. He continued to be allowed to cheer and to coach and to be given unfettered access to these young athletes, many of whom were very young teenagers. These are children. And not only that, but no one called John Doe number 1 to tell him about these reports from other athletes. No one called Mary Doe, who is John Doe number 1's mother. They had no idea. And all the while this was going on, Nick Frizzell is in and out of this gym, hosting cheer camps around children, while Premier and others knew of the reports of sexual misconduct and grotesque sexual abuse of children. So while they can continue to talk the talk of safety and cheer and issue social media blasts and email blasts and reports bragging about how they provide a safe atmosphere for these children, we have seen once again that the adults in the room have failed. Premier failed, the coaches failed, and in the wake of all of that are young men like John Doe number 1 and John Doe number 2. And while it is under unimaginably tragic and horrible circumstances that we stand here, we are all honored to stand here beside, not literally, but with John Doe number 1 and number 2 as we move forward to demand accountability and justice and change.
Can we have your name?
Alexandra Benevento.
Jessica Fickling with the Strom Law Firm, and I am also honored to be here with my colleagues today. And our case asks a very simple question, which is, what is more important than the safety of our children? We have answered that question. There is nothing more important than the safety of our children, and yet the institutions and entities that we have filed this lawsuit against have not answered that question. As Allie indicated when she spoke, there are statements that have been made with regard to this specific case, statements made by USASF, statements made by Varsity, and those statements are too little, too late. Varsity and the companies that it empowers have an endowment that is funded on the backs of these athletes. The athletes and their families pay copious amounts of money to ensure that this sport continues. And for that money, they are given a promise that they are going to be safe, that the environments that they cheer in, the gyms and the competitions, will be safe. And yet, those environments are ill-equipped to handle these kinds of allegations. But the allegations are not a surprise. If you look at the list that USASF has created, the ineligibility list, that ineligibility list is a newer invention, and it's not a complete list. Even USASF says we have selected the individuals for this list who we believe to be a danger to the sport of cheer, the broader sport of cheer. which highlights the problem with the entire system. It is insular, it is a labyrinth, it makes reporting difficult, it puts the onus on the reporter to check the correct boxes as opposed to Varsity, as opposed to any of its member gyms, to adequately root out these kinds of allegations. We are asking for a system that is zero tolerance to this kind of abuse against children. We are asking for a system that is willing to take a hard look at what it has done and what it says it will do, and to make those necessary changes. We are here to ensure that the sport continues in the safest way possible for these children. And so we do ask that question of Varsity, of USASF, of Bain, of Charles Bank, of all of the entities here. What is more important than the safety of our children?
With that, we'll take whatever questions any of you all may have, and we expect there'll be a few.
So the lawsuit names a gym in Knox County. Are you able to share anything about potential criminal charges related?
Oh, well, as of right now, as you know, there are not, but I think that usually we don't go this far in saying this, but we fully expect that there to be criminal charges filed in this. I will tell you that myself and Mrs. Benevento, who's an extremely good and more than capable criminal attorney as well, worked throughout the last weekend to prepare all of the documents we had for a federal agency. We won't name who that agency is, and we made sure that that was overnighted. We've been in contact with U.S. attorneys. We've also been in contact with local Knox County officials. But Mr. Frizzell is still out today. We'll let that stand on its own merit.
He's still out. Is he still an employee of Varsity? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if he's on the ineligible list. I don't know if he's an employee of Varsity. As of this morning, he was still a cheerleader, but I don't know if that's the case right now.
On the case of Mr. Frizzell, talking about reports that weren't being addressed to John Doe number 1, his mother Mary Doe, do we have any idea about how far these reports got when they weren't being addressed? You saw probably the statement from President Seeley and all of the requirements that Varsity personnel are to go through annually or semi-annually to be a registered Varsity employee. Do we know how far these reports got up the ladder before they were not reported to John Doe?
It is our understanding and our belief that these allegations were reported to the gym owner, reported to USASF. At some point, USASF issued a letter to Mr. Frizzell letting him know that he was ineligible for membership with USASF. We don't know where it went from there, and I believe, and we would contend that obstruction of the reporting process or that convoluted process, no one knows where that report went. But what I can tell you is this: Nick Frizzell was still in that gym as recently as a week and a half ago.
So
per the Google, right now he's still a cheerleader at the University of Tennessee.
Okay, makes sense. So this is the second lawsuit we filed in the last month, also with Rockstar Gym in Greenville. Where does it go from here? What pieces of the puzzle are needed to be gathered before we're not outside of the courthouse, but we're inside of the courthouse?
I think it's a great question. Thank you for asking it. We are currently looking into the levels of control that some of these entities exercised over the reporting mechanisms as well as over the gyms themselves. It's our understanding that these gyms are what are called member gyms. And they are, again, ill-equipped to handle the reporting process. And instead, if any report comes forward of any kind of inappropriate conduct, misconduct, for instance, that report is directed to USASF. We are exploring that level of control, as well as the way in which USASF was responsible to Varsity and that entire tiering of systems. In order for us to actually get into the case, we're pushing forward at this point, while we continue to explore other potential victims, while we remain open and we have been contacted by other individuals. We want to meet these defendants in the courthouse now, and we want to focus on these cases that we have filed as we continue to look into expanding our footprint in these cases.
The case at oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Now, I was just going to add procedurally before we get into the courtroom itself. We have filed in federal court, obviously, and so the court will set its schedule, and we're going to seek an expedited track, which is available in this district, for this case to proceed in an expedited fashion. We feel that justice should be brought here. These children should be protected in an expedited fashion, and we're going to seek the fastest possible resolution to this case. And of course, if criminal charges are brought, that may have some impact on the judicial process or procedure, but that's the next step, is seeking that expedited track. And of course, the federal magistrate judge and the judge, his or herself, will have say on that.
Do you know if a hearing has been set yet?
We just filed it last night.
Okay.
The case with Rockstar.
Can somebody else ask another question?
Like-
Goodness gracious.
I've
Peter
got them all
Jennings
written
over here
down
asking
here.
all the questions. No, it's okay.
Asking sensitive questions.
Yeah, they're good questions.
The case with Rockstar, 6 people came forward in that case, but it was alleged there were probably 100 or more victims in total. 2 John Does coming forward in the case of Mr. Frizzell. How many victims do we anticipate are associated with him in particular? Do we think it's anywhere in the same range as Mr. Foster, or do we think it's just these 2?
We filed, I believe it's on behalf of 9 or 10, including our amended complaint of John and Jane Does in the case of Rockstar Greenville. We do anticipate that there are more victims of Mr. Frizzell. We believe we have knowledge that there are more victims of Mr. Frizzell. But as Jessica said, one of the things we don't want to lose track of is we're going to do the work to represent these individuals. We're not going to let them down, and so it'd be a little bit premature to talk about where we go next, but let's just say that we've been contacted by dozens of individuals around the country, and we will explore how we proceed, because those individuals deserve justice, and we're going to fight for that. This is not going to stop with Rockstar and Premier, I can tell you that much.
How does this case fit in to the national context of other cases that have emerged where alleged harassment has been brought up? We have the gymnastics situation. We have a wrestling situation. This is yet another sport. How does this fit into that national context?
I believe that this is a culture problem. What we have seen through speaking with survivors, victims all across the country is that there is a culture of over-sexualization in cheer. There is a culture of placing adults with children, drugs, alcohol. And so in the case of USA Gymnastics, I think Bakari has said this before, Larry Nassar was one person. We have reason to believe that there are people like Larry Nassar, that there are predators in gyms all across the country. And what we've done on behalf of the Jane and John Does that we represent thus far is in an effort not only to bring justice to them individually, but also to bring accountability to the industry at large, and to make change so that these children can enjoy the sport in a safe way, free from the fear that they're going to be abused by the adults that are supposed to be protecting them.
Can you speak to the multiple companies involved? I know the complaint mentions RICO violations. Can you detail that, Webb?
And I think that the complaint does a fairly good job of laying out some of the labyrinth essentially of entities in existence that perpetuated this scheme. But if we look to the very top, we've got sort of the funders, right? We've got our Bain Capital and our Charles Bank that sort of funded the system throughout. And then we move to the Varsity defendants. And Varsity is a decades-old company that has since broken off. We've got Varsity Spirit, we've got Varsity Brands Holding LLC, and those are all on sort of the same tier. And then through those entities, we have USASF and USA Cheer. Those are supposed to be, quote unquote, the regulatory agencies. And those regulatory agencies are supposed to do more than simply regulate the size of a bow or the type of shoes that are used during competitions. Those regulatory bodies are supposed to be available so that athletes can make reports and so that they can be assured that their sport is safe. And that is the framework of the entities here. Now the gyms themselves become members of USASF in order to be allowed to participate in the varsity competitions. And vis-a-vis the gyms, the athletes also become members of USASF. And so it's a perpetual cycle where the athletes are funding USASF, the athletes' gyms are also funding USASF, and all of that is going into the varsity pot at these competitions and through branding, through marketing, etc.
Because,
we do one or two more, I'm sorry.
yeah, because of how broad the varsity umbrella is, you know, and these may be just two isolated gyms. You're saying you're getting calls across the country. We represent 3 areas of the states of Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas. Families who are going to be watching this will probably have a connection through a daughter or a friend or a relative to varsity gyms. What's your message to families who are going to be watching this evening about the accountability and the justice you're trying to acquire for these victims and to varsity?
Well, that's a great question and an important one, and I believe the answer is that's why we're filing this lawsuit here. Not only is it the center of our country, the crossroads of America, we are bringing this to their doorstep, and this is a large web that reaches far and wide, unfortunately, and affects too many households. And you know, as an elected official, I have the ability to fight for the protection and public safety of our children. And I'm privileged to be a member of the bar to be able to do the same thing in a different context. We're seeking to bring justice and accountability to these companies and those who have done harm or wish to do harm to these innocent children. And we seek, you know, justice for these families. And I think it's important for these families to know that it's not just us attorneys up here fighting for them. There are others out there who are available to them in this difficult situation. They shouldn't be afraid to come forward, and we are seeking to change the culture, which was referenced earlier. This is a bigger problem that reaches too far and affects too many, but families should know that they have people who are fighting for them and going not only into the courtroom but across the country to do this work on their behalf.
We'll do one more question, and then there'll be a press release that goes out, and it will have a copy of the complaint. You good? You got a question? Okay.
Mr. Clemens, anything you can do from the legislative side at this point related to this? I'm not sure you can, but just anything you can do.
Well, too often laws are written by insurance companies and the business interest, not only in the Tennessee State Legislature, but across the country and even in the halls of Congress. So, you know, I think this is something that constantly needs to be looked at. Just recently, as a few years ago, we expanded the statute of limitations for these types of claims. That was a positive step forward. I don't think that it went far enough, even though I did support that law, and it was a positive advancement. We have a lot of work to do. And I think, you know, what we do affects everyone in their daily lives, even in, you know, at a cheer gym. And we can do more. We should do more. I think the statute of limitations, tort caps, all those types of things must be revisited, because again, I think the question was raised earlier. What is our number one priority? The safety of our children should be everyone's priority. Whether it's in the classroom, a gym, you know, in a gymnastics studio, a fencing competition, anywhere. And I think the state legislature and any elected member in public office has a duty to look at every possible way to facilitate protecting the safety of children. And so I think tort caps, I think statute of limitations, I think just anything we can do to have a direct impact on the culture itself would be impactful, and the supervision of our children.
So with that, we want to say thank you. I know there's a lot going on in the amazing city of Memphis, Tennessee. We hope that you all will get some comments from Varsity and Bain and USASF and USA Cheer. But I wanted to just get the last word and say, you know, John Ray and I are up here, but we have two amazing lawyers here as well, and I didn't want to leave without just making sure that Ms. Benevento and Ms. Fickling, who are kind of shepherding this process, get the praise that they deserve in front of all of these cameras, and our entire team back. We wake up in the morning and talk to victims and survivors. We go to bed at night talking to victims and survivors, and in between that time, we're drafting complaints and stuff, trying to make sure that we bring them justice. And so we hope more come forward, and I'll just end where I began, which is to simply say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Everybody good?
Actually, can we get the spelling of girls' last names?
Yeah. So it's Benevento, spelled Ben like the boy's name,